I was about to say, I'm not sure how to overcome that, other than continue to try.
That's the power of perseverance.
There you go. Okay, we should be in good shape now. We do not have a facilitator yet for this group, so Kelsey, do you want to, by default, do you want me to facilitate for a bit? Any preferences?
No, I mean, no preferences. I think like I'm happy to go and then we can jump off from time to time.
Sounds good. Perfect.
Also, I want y'all to know, so I just moved and there's someone in my neighborhood that they go walking with their dog, but also their cat several times a day, and it's my favorite thing.
Oh, I love it.
So
cat on a leash too.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen that. I did a double take the first time I saw that. That's wonderful.
It makes my day.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the very first Human Rights Commission processes meeting. This is a task force, so we'll do we need to do welcome / introduction?
You're not required to. It's just if you like.
Okay. Okay, let's go real quick. We'll do popcorn. My name is Kelsey. I'm the vice chair of the Human Rights Commission. You should hear pronouns, and I'm going to popcorn to Kira.
Hey everybody, I'm Kira. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am camping. Love this background, right?
Let's go to Ilana.
Thanks, Kelsey. I forgot to popcorn.
It happens. Hi, I am. I should turn my camera on, actually. Apologies. I just finished another meeting and I'm like, I need food. Hi, all. Ilana Lynn, they, them pronouns. I am also a human rights commissioner and so excited to kick off this task force. And I will pass it to Joaquin.
Hey, thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joaquin, and I'm also a member of the Human Rights Commission. Robert?
Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Marshall. I am a member of the commission, and I'm just cleaning the screen here on my note-taking tablet, so that's why my head's down. But I will pass it off to Gretchen.
Gretchen Bennett, she, her pronouns, staff liaison to the commission.
Perfect. Well, so excited to have everyone here. We'll move into public comment. I'm assuming there's been no public comment. Gretchen?
None received.
Okay. That would be really interesting on this committee. Wow. Or this task force. Wow. Okay, so do we have quorum? We do.
You do.
Okay, great. Well, we'll move into an approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the agenda.
All right, it has been moved. Is there a second? Oh, beautiful. All right. All those in favor of approving the agenda, thumbs up, yay, or aye?
Yay.
Aye.
Beautiful. All right. That passes. Now on to selection of chair / facilitator.
Yeah, I didn't know if anybody wanted to serve in that role or if you'd like to appoint one. Hamadi had said he was interested in hearing if anybody else would be open to doing that, but if not, he would serve. But he's not here.
Yeah, anyone feeling wanting
down? Give it a go.
I would like to nominate Ilana.
I'm gonna second that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wait, do we vote on this or is that a Hamadi appointment?
Oh, that's what it was.
I think it would be great to go ahead and vote, but you're right. Task force and committees leadership is appointed by the chair, so your vote would be to recommend the appointment to the chair.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, great. It has been motioned and seconded. Yes. I'd seconded it. I don't know.
I'd like to propose an amendment, Kelsey.
Yes.
I would like to amend the motion to recommend that Ilana serve and function as chair for the course of this meeting as we wait for Hamadi's approval.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful, great. So we're just going to suggest. Ilana, do you accept the nomination?
Yes. So
Beautiful.
I just go through the agenda and say what items we're discussing.
Basically, yes. And I'm happy to yeah. Okay. Is there anyone else who is interested in chairing this task force? All right, great. All those in favor of suggesting, nominating / putting forward Ilana as the chair of this task force, thumbs up, yay, do
Yay.
something.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Same, agreed.
Great. All right. All those opposed? Nobody. All right. Cool. It passes. So, Ilana, we will suggest that putting forward. Ilana, would you like to run the rest of the meeting?
Sure. I can attempt that, you know, a trial period.
Oh, doing great.
Thank you. Okay. So next we would move on to development of goals and objectives of the task force. Gretchen, did you have anything like basic framework you wanted to share, or is this just a gab session?
I think mostly a gab session to open to what your interests are. I could begin with just a simple framework. You have things, of course, that you know that are fixed for you, like we must operate as a public body accessible to the community. Your membership is appointed by our mayor, you know, and recognized, affirmed by city council. We have quorum rules about when votes happen, but there's a lot that's not fixed that you can choose to do that'll help you achieve your goals and objectives. Commissions have varied, for example, in formality in terms of when to recognize people who are not members of the commission to speak. Some chairs have been quite clear to recognize commission members only, whereas other chairs have welcomed in community members in informal ways directly into the conversation. So it might be an example of where you have variance. Some commissions have had the commission seat sit in one area and have the public in another area. Other commissions have integrated public and commission members. So you've got some room, and then you do have some fixed items. So be keeping that in mind as you consider. But other than that, no, I think this is your space to think about. Do you want to change? You know, you could think holistically about the experience of the commission, you know, soup to nuts, how we share about the meetings, where and how you meet, the way you approach or tackle larger assignments, smaller assignments. You can really go anywhere with it. So Ilana, I hope that helps as an introduction.
I know. So speaking from personal experience, when I've been on like similar like projects, what we started off with is we like combed through, we went through the Constitution, the bylaws, like section by section, to like propose amendments and kind of talk through things. I don't know if that's something that we would be helpful, or if that's what we want to do. That's what I've done in the past.
This is Gretchen. I thought of something I probably should have said at the intro. You helped me remember that, Kelsey. One of the things the city's working on right now is a common set of bylaws that they're going to end up hoping for all boards and commissions to follow. There'll be some variants. There are some quasi judicial boards and commissions, but that may be the ideas may or may not work as we see what emerges from that process, and if and where there's flexibility, I'm not sure. So that might be homework for me to go check on if, like, what questions might be, in terms of bylaws, might be open. Again, there's things that you function with that are a bit outside the bylaws too.
Cool.
Yeah, so when I think of this, I also originally like pictured going through the bylaws, which I do believe you guys recently did before I joined the commission, isn't that? Okay. So
Yeah, Gretchen did like a couple of edits of like things we've done in practice. But yeah, that was it.
I will
Okay.
say that process, Ilana, felt to me more like an update to things that were necessary to update, and less, all right, let's break this down and reconsider it, and that those are different things to me. So in other words, it'd be totally worth going through it and seeing what we would like to see represented in it moving forward.
Yeah.
And so how much would we be able to change ourselves before like the city council would have to get involved? What amount of power do we have here?
Well, heretofore, this new review process that's happening, the commission has been able to amend bylaws as an independent body without the council becoming involved, but any change to the bylaws, we'd always route through the legal department to confirm that they were appropriate. You can't go outside of the scope of Salem Revised Code chapters 8 and 97, of course, without a council connection, because they are the ones that determine that policy. So I think it really depends on what you have in mind. Like the chair, it's within all bylaws for the chair to recognize a speaker. And so the chair can choose to do that or not do that, kind of like that's a choice that the commission can make independently. You can bring back name cards and change seating, for example, independently. If you want to work on topics other than human rights and discrimination, that's a council decision. If you want executive sessions, debatable given our context. So I think it depends on what you have in mind. Our attorney's office was invited to these meetings and wasn't able to attend, but is happy to review a list of questions or review a draft set of changes. So anything we're unsure of, we can route for their help.
Okay, that makes sense. Does anyone else want to share what their like general perspective or even motivation for joining this task force was, so that way we can start to track the themes we want to address?
So if I recall correctly, part of this task force came about in regards to some concerns in the way the ceasefire conversations were handled by the commission, and kind of, for lack of better terms, kind of just tightening up essentially the way that we conduct business. If I'm recalling correctly, there was a public complaint, for lack of better terms. I wanted to know, like, I know you're not really able to share much information about that, Gretchen, but what kind of in there do you think would help shape, because I know this came about directly after that complaint was elevated. What things are you aware of that were mentioned in that letter that could be discussed in this body to shape future meetings so we could avoid other situations similar to that one?
Yeah, thank you for asking, Robert. And I don't yet have an update on the course of the review or investigation that the legal department's doing as a result of that letter. So my understanding is when they're ready, they would be reaching out with that information. So
Okay.
I don't yet have that for sharing here, but I can go and ask hey, the commission's looking at this conversation. What can we understand about that to help inform it?
Or what things we could implement into this task force as we look at, our goals and objectives, like what are some recommendations they might be able to provide based off of what they've gathered so far in their process to inform some of our goals and objectives going forward.
Great.
Yeah, Kelsey, then Kira.
So I'm trying to think back about like what some of those complaints were. I think one of them was, and I don't think this was from the person that made the like formal complaint, but it was confusing as to who was and wasn't on the commission. And I guess no, that was all I wanted to share. So we can like formalize that by either doing like name cards or changing our names on the Zoom. That's it.
I would also suggest maybe if people are comfortable adding a photo and bio to the website, if that's something that we're able to do. I just always find that that's helpful when I'm watching similar meetings like this. So just an idea. Okay, Kira, take it away.
I love both of those ideas because I do think it was difficult for people to figure out who was and wasn't on the commission. I attended a couple of those meetings where I wasn't on the commission. And another thing that I kind of took away, especially during the public comment, was there wasn't a whole lot of structure in like when people could say what they wanted to say. And I think that was like part of the issue. I do love that the HRC is a little bit more lax when it comes to like having conversations with the public, but I still think that we could potentially look at implementing some sort of structure so that, when the commission is actually trying to get work done or when they have presentations, there's a time for that. So maybe we could look at potentially setting a time for public comment before and maybe after. That way there's still that communication, but there's still time for the commissioners to actually do the work. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. I also think that we could have it to where it's like commissioner only discussion. And then if we find that there's extra time, we can say, okay, is there any member of the public who would like to comment on this as well? And so that way they're still joined in during the discussion, but in a more facilitated way. But regardless, I do think that we should put in rule or bylaw or somewhere how we engage with the public, just so that everyone has the same understanding and it's consistent across all the things we do.
Can I add one more thing, Alana?
Please do.
Okay. I totally agree with that as well. I think that's a good idea. Gretchen, another thing, I know in our bylaws it says that we follow Robert's rules, I think like the newest edition or 11th edition or something like that. Do you know, because I think I've been told this previously, but like our decisions that are made can be called into question if we're not following that structure during the meetings. Is that accurate?
Well, that's a good and fair question.
Since we're advisory, I wasn't entirely sure if we fall underneath that still.
Well, thank you, Kira. That's kind of where my mind went to, but you are advising, you're making a recommendation, and I do think it's important for the integrity of the recommendations that you make and the actions you do take, like minutes approval, that there clearly be a first and a second, opportunity for people to comment and a vote. And I think that kind of anchors the Robert's Rules implementation, that I think, like, if a recommendation went to city council about a policy change and we hadn't done that, absolutely, I think that could get called into question. Whether I think what splits the hairs is like, oh, somebody makes an amendment to the motion and we don't necessarily vote on the first before we go to the second. That's an untested question. I'm not sure if folks would find that a bit hair splitting to follow the absolute every last part. But I think it would behoove us and always strengthen us that anytime you're taking an action to make sure we're doing Robert's rules. So we could do more training, more scripts, more, you know, reference material to help us do that, because that is the process.
Okay, thank you. That answered my questions.
That brought up a new idea for me that, I mean, this is thinking real far ahead. But when we finish all of this, we should have a meeting dedicated to training the rest of the commission on the processes that we develop and work out, so that way it's not just written somewhere. We actually like go through the whole process as a group. So how are we feeling about this conversation? Do we feel like we've covered what the objective is? Do we have more things to say? Open floor.
I think the only thing I'd add, I think I'm in general agreement with everything everyone has shared. It's going back to Robert's opening comment about the ceasefire process. The short answer is yes. I mean, I think these conversations are born out of that process. I think I'll repeat what I mentioned just for the sake of mentioning it here. I'll repeat what I mentioned a few months ago, which is I'm not really particularly interested in this space being a relitigation of the outcomes, or maybe even truly even the process of that experience. I think I would be the first to admit that that process was imperfect, and well, I think what I'm hoping to do is, to the extent that it's possible, through these conversations, to mitigate the extent to which process colors the decisions and the recommendations that we make as a body. And I think it would be good for us to talk about some specifics from that process, because I think some of them inform the conversations that we're having. But again, I'm not really interested in relitigating that. And especially because some of us weren't involved in that process who are here, which is good. I think that's good.
Yeah, I'm not either, Joaquin. I agree with you, but I think, just, taking the lessons learned from that,
Sure,
like, without
absolutely.
relitigating the entire, the entire event or events of that. But the things that, we, essentially, what do we want to do the next time to improve that? And just drawing on some of that to make sure that if this does happen again.
And I think, by the way,
Or
as a general comment, I will say, Kelsey and Hamadi, who led us through that process, they navigated that whole thing with a lot of integrity. I think one of the big takeaways from me was that was one of the challenges. It all came down to the whimsy of me, Kelsey, and Hamadi, or our personalities, basically, as opposed to what was written down. You know what I mean? There was no corpus of rules or procedures that we could default to that would allow us to kind of guide us through those processes. And by the way, there's no blueprint to that conversation in particular, but I can imagine others that are like it, that are comparably contentious, or that I think would benefit from rules. And so in terms of what I'm looking to get out of these conversations is, I think I would like to have I don't know if they would be contained in the bylaws or if they would be outside of it, but rules for conversation beyond Robert's Rules of Orders, but just what are our best practices as a commission. I'd also like to see basic policies and values around conversation that maybe aren't rules. So for example, and here I am going to invoke something that happened in that process. For example, one of the major complaints that we received by some members of the community was that the Palestinian flag was visible in one of our conversations on camera. And the truth is, we can't do anything about that because it's free speech. You know, if it had been an Israeli flag or a Jordanian flag, or we wouldn't have done anything about that. I think there are exceptions to that. I think there are limits to that. But I mentioned that I go into detail there only to say a policy about free speech during conversations for the HRC might be something worth having that would be a guide for us as commissioners and members of the public who are commenting alike to say, we may, I'll just say my bias would be to have a pretty liberal, open interpretation of free speech, meaning we may not agree. We may vehemently disagree, but you as a commissioner, or you as a member of the public have a right to say things and to phrase them a certain way. And you have a right to be mad about the way that was phrased, but we don't have a right to stop that from being said or to hold people hostage over words. And again, there are limits to everything, but I think something like that was something I'm interested in having come from this conversation. Again, I'm not sure if that's a rule, but some kind of, I'm getting long-winded now, but basically I'm saying I'd like to talk about the sorts of classes of things that we'd like to have deliverable from these conversations, whether they're actual amendments to the bylaws or whether they're rules or whether they're best practices. So open to all of that, but I think that's the only thing I'd add on, Ilana, right now.
Okay,
If that makes sense.
so that definitely makes sense. From this conversation, I'm thinking we have 2 action items. We should ask legal for their general advice on how the process could have been handled better, just from their point of view in ways that we could have, that we can update the process for all future events. And then a cursory review of the bylaws where we can just come to the next meeting with, if anything stands out to you that you feel needs to be addressed or that you are really passionate about, bring those to the next meeting. And if we think that that's fine, we can just focus on the process for now and then move on to the bylaws once we get finished with that. How does that sound to everyone? Do you think I'm missing anything?
I think the only thing I'd add, Ilana, if you'll permit me, would be to ask Gretchen over the course of our conversation today to kind of compile some topics of conversation for all of us to digest in advance of the next meeting.
Mhm.
So I would like to have some of those available to us coming into the next conversation so that we can talk about that.
Gretchen, does that feel doable for you?
It does, and I want to make sure I understood that, like, maybe generate these notes and highlight questions for conversation well in advance of your next meeting, so you have time to think and digest.
As well in advance as you can.
Yep, I
Okay.
can do that. Does part of your discussion also get into I don't know if this is part of the values of the discussion, Joaquin, that you were talking about, but sometimes we struggled a little bit with kind of people talking over people or the cavalcade of interest in sharing. Like you've got Zoom and you've got in person, and folks are kind of jumping in when others are talking. I don't know if that's just like a communications best practice idea or a guideline to help the chair, like honoring free speech, but also that basic courtesy or ability to somehow try to help it be one conversation at a time. I don't know. I think that got a little tricky with both Zoom and in person at some of the larger meetings. Not sure. But that felt like part of the challenge.
I agree. Kara, take it away.
I think I think that there's a way to go about it, especially when we have like big meetings like that where there's just so much public comment. It might be great to have like a script ahead of time that the chair reads that's like, hey, this is when public comment will happen. This is how long you have, kind of as a reminder to the public. Just because, again, I know that the HRC, like, we like to keep things as personable with the public as possible. We want it to be a conversation, and I love that. But maybe when we have those big events, we just have a script already ready to present. And also, Joaquin, please don't take any of my comments like either you or Kelsey or Hamadi did a bad job, because you didn't. You did great with what you were provided. So
Okay, Kelsey.
So I'm thinking back about like a speakers list. So like common practice is like the chair takes down a speakers list, so like people will like raise their placard or whatever, and then be put on the list. I'm wondering if like when we have a meeting with like more than X number of guests, we have placards. And maybe this is too formal, but like it can just be a plain laminated sheet of paper, and then they dry erase their name on it. So then when they want to speak, they just raise their placard, and then the chair will like acknowledge them and then write down their name. And then with like Zoom, then we can do like raise a hand, because that automatically tracks the order of when people have raised their hand. So just think about formality. I think I'm going too far into the weeds, but
But a way
Yeah.
to do that, yeah.
So I'm hearing from this that we should add a third item to the objectives, of maybe making like a policy and procedures document where we outline how we would like to address specific situations, such as public comment or open discussion among commissioners, and that will be an item that lives with the commission, just like bylaws. Kira, is this a new hand or did you leave it up? I couldn't tell, sorry.
I left it up. I'm sorry.
No worries. Okay, anyone else?
Before we get too far away from that conversation, Ilana, I think I would just add, you know, you don't know this about me. I'm a huge free speech advocate. I can think of few limits to free speech. But I think that rules and procedures actually help free speech, because if you're talking over me, my speech is not being, I can't get it out, you know. So I really value comments. I think yeah, I think I'd like to see kind of a guidelines and procedures like you mentioned. I think just to add to what Kelsey and Kira were saying, one thing that I would have done differently, I think, would have been, especially in the first meeting, was two things. I wouldn't have reopened public comment, and you know, we had a speakers list, but then people who already spoke again, or interjected themselves, and so we have to find a way to honor whatever procedure we have over the course of that conversation. You know, so if there's a list of people who sign up public comment, one, will stick to that list, and two, when your whatever it is, 3 minutes is over, then you've shared what you've had to share. And for the sake of prioritizing speech, we have to also move on to other people. And that was something that got better, by the way, over the course of the multiple meetings. And by the end, I thought we were doing fine. Others may disagree, but I think that was especially evident in the first meeting. And so having something like that as part of that conversation, I think would be good. Also, just to mention things, to have them read out loud. Talking about location, where we meet, and how we determine when we meet. How to de-escalate public kind of hostility during public comment, I think, is something that I would like to have some kind of guidance for. How we engage with outreach during a contentious public conversation. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is Gretchen, God bless her, Kelsey, Hamadi, and I were meeting a lot with leaders, community leaders, and others during those 3 weeks a lot. We were having conversations a lot about how do we bring everyone into this conversation. And I think that was evidenced by the conversations improving over the course of those 3 weeks, but it also was just, there was also just no real, there was no history of us doing that as a commission. And so we were kind of just relying on our personalities. And each of us had very different conversations with different people. I think all of it was a net good, but I think for the sake of this kind of continuity, providing some guidance for future leadership for the commission, for things like that would be something I would be interested in
Yeah.
exploring.
I think that's a good idea. How about us commissioners? Think of the things, especially the ones with more experience. Think of the situations you wish you had a procedure for, and email Gretchen whenever it comes to you. And then if you could just compile that into a list for us, Gretchen, so that way we aren't breaching any of the communication rules, that would be great.
I would be happy to do that. Thank you.
Perfect. That way, everyone, we can just work our way through the list, and then we'll have our booklet, and it'll be done.
Right. That was the spirit of what I was trying to say earlier. Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion on our goals and objectives?
If you forgive me, one last thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Two things. I actually would be really interested in exploring what the role of executive session might be for the commission legally, and maybe not for the full commission, but definitely I'm thinking really ahead to when we have the data governance committee set up, and what leeway we have to having pretty sensitive conversations around people and data and stuff. And obviously we can't make decisions in executive session, but I would value the ability to have those conversations. And maybe there are other applications other than data governance for which that may be relevant, but I'm thinking particularly of that, first of all. Secondly, I think one of the animating questions for everyone that I have is what that I hope scaffold these conversations is just the feeling of the commission. What do we want the experience of this commission to be? And I think it's a relevant question to kind of return to again and again, because to Kira's point that she's made a couple of times, I think is a good one. We're different. We are a different commission. And yeah, I'm coming up on, what is it, almost 2.5 years, 3 years. And sometimes that difference has been good, sometimes it's been bad, but I think it needs to be good. I think it's only a good thing that a body. Well, first of all, we're just unique. We're unusual. I mean, not every city has a human rights commission. 1, 2, our mandate is really beautiful, and 3, we are really community serving in a way that is kind of unique. And how do we make that thing, which can at times be difficult and challenging, but I think is ultimately a beautiful expression of service to the city and its diverse communities, how do we make that experience of engagement with your government and the public, how do we make that as good of an experience as possible for as many people as possible? I think that is kind of the animating question that I think ought to guide us through these conversations.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. That's a great guiding question for us to strive towards.
Alana, if I may, that brings to mind, Joaquin, a couple of meetings ago when you formed the task force, I think we got a public comment in the community from someone who said, I hope you don't lose the heart of who you are. Sometimes there can be dominant culture norms to processes and meetings that can end up excluding the very communities we aim to serve. And so it reminds me of that public comment that was shared. It was the meeting where we met at Center 50.
Yeah, Marianne said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to remind you of that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And speaking personally, I come from a tradition where no decision is made before everyone speaks. and we practice that in my culture. And I watched back, for example, on the process for the ceasefire thing, and every commissioner spoke throughout the process. Everyone who was engaged spoke at least once, and I think it's something to be proud of. But I'm not saying that has to be the policy. I'm not going to impose my stuff on other people, but I'm saying something like that is a good thing too. That's non-hierarchical or less hierarchical, kind of not always as this kind of Western laden decision making values. I think there's room, to your point, Gretchen, for that sort of thinking. Anyways.
Yeah, I think that rounds us out perfectly. Unless anyone has anything they would like to share.
Yeah, I think just looking back at, because we talked quite a bit about, public comment, having a time and place for that. And as we move through that, I think we need to, as a body, define what is public comment and what is guest, because I know in previous meetings we've liked having the ability to have guests come in and also weigh in on particular discussion topics throughout the meeting. To some might be confusing on why one person might be able to weigh in during conversation, but then other people are limited to like the 2 or 3 minutes in public comment. And so I think defining that, how do we define who a guest is, what makes a guest, when can guests comment outside of regular public comment times, just so it is written. We do have the clear left and right limit on that.
Yeah, I think that would be a great thing to put in the procedures. And I've got a couple ideas on how to do that, but it's probably better to be written down than to be verbally.
Yeah, and I don't want to, and I want to be clear, like I don't want to limit the guest input in the commission conversation, because we've had some guests and everything that have helped shape some really good conversations and discussion through the commission. And so I'm not saying that I want to limit or remove that guest feature, but just so we can present it, so when people ask questions we can explain why one person was able to present, because I think that is one thing that does make it unique, is that we do let some guests with some lived and professional experience on some of these topics engage, who might not necessarily have the capacity to be a member of the commission, and because they don't have that time, and they recognize that, but they also recognize that they have value in some of these conversations. And I think it is worth giving them that time, I think, to say what they want to contribute to the agenda topics at hand. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like we could even just have it to be when we do our introductions at the beginning of the meeting, we introduce them as an invited guest and distinguish them from a member of the public, and that might just be simple enough. But we can definitely dive into the details once we have our full list of things we want to address, because I think addressing it holistically will give us better results than if we try to address one problem at a time. Okay, one last pause. Any doorknob thoughts we want to hash out?
Yeah, I have one more.
Okay, go for it.
Again, I'm relying on our most recent experience back in April. But having a mechanism for the commission to make a recommendation. For example, the mandate that we were given by mayor and council was really vague. And I think that was a source of confusion and brought some challenges from a lot of people, ourselves, public, and ultimately even city council. And the mayor commented on that when the ceasefire resolution was adopted in May.
Yeah.
June?
I think
May? It doesn't matter. And so, that was kind of maybe unique, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe we need to find a way to say, if council is going to approach us, if we're going to tackle something, we need these things to be met in order to proceed. For example, there was a world in which that conversation was delayed until we had clarity from the mayor or from council, or we kind of engineered our own clarity. You know, we needed to scaffold we needed to ground ourselves to move forward. But for example, here's one lesson learned. I'll just say something, a mistake that I made. Kira said we did a good job. We made mistakes too. One mistake I made was in the first meeting, I offered things that I thought needed, based on the conversation that we were having and the public engagement that we had had, not knowing how much longer the conversation, in other words, how many more meetings were going to happen, recognizing the urgency and pressure from the community, needing to have direction for our conversations so as to not just totally stagnate and plateau. I offered up 3 things that I thought needed to be content things that I moved 3 content things to be included in the statement. Now that was adopted, but I think I don't know how much wisdom there was in that. And it was done, and I said so at the time, to help us find direction. But something like, and that angered some people, and that was a point of feedback multiple times from different people, and so I wouldn't do that again. That's something I learned in that process. But I think something like that can be avoided for others moving forward if we have a procedure that allows for kind of, I guess maybe this is totally, if we come back to the beginning of the conversation, just allowing for, okay, what are we empowered to do in terms of making recommendations, and what does that look like? How do we take that journey as a commission together? Because if there had been, okay, well, you can't vote on final content until the final draft has been proposed, then that would have been moved. That wouldn't have happened. Stuff like that, I think, would be something I'd be interested in exploring over the course of our conversation together, just to help others keep true to what they need to be doing and not invite unnecessary confusion into a process.
Yeah, I definitely think it's important to build off of our past experiences, and obviously as a elder commission member, you have a lot more experience with that. So we're all going to be able to learn from that experience. Okay, because we only have 10 minutes left, I am going to end discussion here just to respect everyone's time. But I do advocate for emailing Gretchen any ideas you want to add to that procedures list, because the more we have, the better we will be able to plan for our future, which leads me into the next topic of plan to provide a future commission, an update at the future commission meeting. I'm assuming that will be my responsibility now.
Yes,
Pending
please.
Hamadi's approval, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. My maybe responsibility.
It will be.
Okay, perfect. I feel prepared to do that. So unless anyone else has something they would like to add to that discussion, anyone? Okay, I'm going to take the crickets as a motion to move forward. Our next meeting date, Gretchen, you have the most responsibility right now. What feels feasible for you to get all of the questions from legal and our procedures in a list?
Thank you for asking. I set aside some time later this week to do notes and tasks from this conversation, so I can certainly achieve that part by the end of the week. I don't know what legal's timeline would be. I can certainly ask them this week, but I can't control for that part. But by the end of this week, I can get notes and your compiled questions out to you all for sure. Okay. And then commissioners, how do we feel? We also have schedules to consider. Does anyone have a strong opinion on the next time we meet, especially people who have been responsible for other meetings?
I'm thinking because this is a task force, so it's supposed to be like for a limited period of time.
Mhm.
And this might be aggressive, but like every 2 weeks? Is that too much?
Does anyone think that they don't have capacity for that? Because we do have quorum requirements.
I think 2 weeks is aggressive, but I'm down. But I do have pretty well, so does Joaquin. Thursdays, second and fourth Thursdays are like no-goes for me, period. I can't be there.
Mondays aren't bad for me. Are Mondays bad for anyone else? What if we make this our meeting time every 2 weeks, and if it feels aggressive and we're getting burned out, we'll reassess?
Works for me.
Serve with the pleasure.
Do we need to make a vote on that?
I don't think so. That feels
Okay.
okay to do without. So would it be every 2 weeks, or would you prefer, I guess a clarifying question, Alana,
Mhm.
prefer like, for example, this is the second Monday. Do you want to be second and fourth Mondays? Or do you just want to roll literally every 2 weeks? So that might vary a little bit.
I like consistency, so I'm down for the Monday of the first or of the second and fourth week, unless anyone feels strongly in a different direction.
As long as it's on my calendar, I'll be okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah, yeah. I
Perfect.
don't-
Okay, great.
yeah, that's that governs everything I do.
Great.
So
Yeah,
Not
a
great.
calendar meeting would be great to set up, if possible.
I will, of course.
Okay, perfect. Any further discussion on that?
yes. Thank you for facilitating.
Yeah.
My pleasure. You didn't see it, but I did a hair flip with my no hair.
You did great, both in the hair flip and facilitation.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other announcements, remarks? No? Well, then I would like to thus take a moment to thank Gretchen for putting this together and for dealing with all of us
Yes.
and all of our many, many requests.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for such thoughtful facilitation today.
I am blushing now. Okay, well, in that case, you guys get 5 minutes back in your day. I motion that we end if this needs a motion. And if not, then goodbye, everyone.
Take care.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, toodaloo.